Hey, it's Rachel, and this video it's really going to be a continuation of advice I had given earlier about how to get your kids to use more healthy ways of coping. So if they're really upset or frustrated or angry or disappointed, how to get them to handle that in a mature, responsible way rather than becoming aggressive or disrespectful or doing things that are just unacceptable. So in the first video, I had talked about the fact that if you want your kids to use healthier strategies, you need to teach them strategies that match their temperament, because in the moment, they're going to do what feels good. So if you tell a really aggressive child to take some deep breaths, chances are in the moment, they have just way too much energy inside, and they're not going to choose to take those deep breaths. So in the first video, I talked a little bit more about how to help them find better strategies that they will use. But in this video, I want to talk to you about how do you actually get them to use those strategies, because just because a strategy is comfortable for a child doesn't mean they're actually going to use it. And the reason they don't use it is what a lot of people don't talk about this, but it's the fact that when we are in a moment of stress, a moment of frustration or annoyance, or we feel out of control, whatever it is, this big emotion that we're feeling, we default to what we've done before in the past. Because when we're flooded with emotions, we're not sitting there thinking, what's the new behavior that I learned and how can I do it? What we're thinking is, I want what I want and I want it now. We're not thinking rationally. We're not thinking, we don't have empathy for other people. We're not worried about being respectful in those moments. We just want what we want in that moment. This is true of adults too, but it's certainly true of children. So let's say you do tell your aggressive child to use a new strategy, like when they're really angry, instead of yelling, they need to push really hard on something to get all of that energy out. Well, how do we make sure they do that? We have to practice in between times of big emotions. Because basically what happens is when we're in this place where we're flooded, like I said, we default to what is known. It's like we create a muscle memory for a behavior, and in a moment of stress, we're going to use that behavior that has the most muscle memory. You can almost think of it like this. Imagine your brain, or a child's brain, is like a jungle. And every time they do a behavior, they create a pathway in the jungle. And so the more they do a certain behavior, the more well-worn that path becomes. So if they have been aggressive, 100 times in the past, and then we teach them this new strategy, maybe to push really hard on something, if we've taught them that strategy about 10 times, well, that path is not as well-worn. So they have this old path that they've done over and over that's really well-worn. They have this new path that's just slightly worn. When they're in a moment of stress and they're faced with, this path, they're going to choose the one that is more well-worn. So they're going to go down that route of doing the behavior they've done over and over in the past. So ultimately, we need to make this new behavior, maybe this pushing hard on something, as well-worn as the old behavior was. And ultimately, what happens with the old behavior is it starts to regrow, the jungle starts to regrow back and they don't use that old behavior anymore. But the new behavior has to become more automatic. And the way we do that is through practice. So how do you actually get kids to practice? Well, there are a number of ways, but what you can do with younger children is, let's say, I would say 6 or 7 years old and below, they're still open to doing things like role plays. Especially if you pretend to be the child and they pretend to be the adult. You say, hey, I'm really upset. What should I do? And then maybe you switch roles. So they'll still do those role plays. They'll still play this out with stuffed animals or action figures maybe. So they can practice really in a playful way. But as kids get older, certainly they're not going to do that anymore. If you have a child who's maybe 8 or 9 and through the teenage years, they're certainly not going to do role plays. What you want to do instead is actually have them teach you. So you might say something like, I'm working on emotional regulation. Can you remind me to practice every once in a while? So instead of you telling them what to do, they are telling you what to do, and you know that your child or your teenager loves to tell you what to do. So you're not asking them to do something new, you're taking responsibility for this, and you're saying, this is something that I'm working on. So that's one way to practice with them. Also, whether you have a child who's younger or older, if you actually talk about books or movies where there's a character who's acting in a certain way, you can actually have discussions about a better way for them to handle situations. Even a discussion about someone else's behavior can strengthen that neural connection or that muscle memory that they have for the new behavior. So I hope that gives you some ideas of why kids don't do what they're supposed to do in the moment and what you can do to help them. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me at rachel@rachel-bailey.com. I'll see you next time.